Welcome back to Rise to Liberty podcast. Today I am joined by Austin Picard, but real quick, I've got a special announcement for everyone watching. This has been a long time in the making, but everyone, I'm not sure if you know who G. Edward Griffin is. If you don't, you should. However, G. Edward Griffin started what he calls the Red Pill University. Every single year they do the Red Pill Expo. Now, this year, anyone going to the Red Pill Expo can actually use my affiliate link and go ahead and get 15% off their tickets at the Red Pill Expo. All you have to do is go to risetoliberty.com/redpill, scan that QR code, make sure and use promo code RISE15 for 15% off, and you can get 15% off your tickets for the Red Pill Expo 2024. So, outside of that, let's get to the Vegas shooting. So, because that's going to do wonders for the YouTube algorithm.
Right. Like I said a second ago, man, like we're starting light. And for me, it's like 10 a.m. So, yeah, first thing, man, get right into the mass shooting. But
just right out the gate, it's,
mhm.
it's what Americans have for breakfast. Apparently, it's what the Europeans think. So,
Right. I mean, with Vegas, though, like it's so insane to me that you mentioned this as well just a second ago privately, that it's one of the sort of untold stories, kind of, because it's very much been left unexplored and sort of overlooked in many ways,
yeah,
especially by the masses or the average individual who's consuming the next wave of mainstream media, you know what I mean, talking points. And so what I think is so interesting and important about Vegas, though, is that it's clearly a very good example for how they seem to utilize these high impact events to consistently exploit us and manufacture consent through a false narrative of some kind, which, of course, with Vegas, I think was the bump stock narrative. And
yes,
right. And just again, how do you get maybe conservatives to transition and shift in their ideology? Maybe you attack a conservative, what was it, a country music festival, Jason
yep,
Aldean, right? Yeah, that would be a very interesting way to potentially manufacture consent to the prioritized demographic of the Republican conservative who is very much pro Second Amendment, right? So
yep.
I just think that that perfectly fits as far as the manufactured narrative and how they always right seem to engineer consent of the governed, and we just fall into the traps and act as if we've never learned from any of these previous events, because most of us haven't, and
Yep.
it seems to be the problem. Right.
Well,
But
and it's like they're able to use shame because it's like, oh, well, even though you're a fan of the Second Amendment, you don't want people to die, do you?
mm,
Well, we got to go ahead and ban this bump stock. And it's
yeah,
like, ban a stupid accessory that only works about half the time, anyways. Like,
right,
first of
which
all,
probably wasn't
no.
even involved
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
shooting, which is even more insane, right?
Yeah.
Because it to me, and again, I've said this before on other shows talking about this, that I'm no firearms expert, and I don't claim to be, and I will be honest when I'm speculating and always, but what I will say is you watch the videos, you listen to the shooting, you listen to the gunfire, and tell me that that's not some sort of fully automatic, M24, like it's I can't
Oh, dude,
remember
it
the
it
yeah.
sounds like a belt fed.
That's what it sounds like. And
Yeah.
so I
Like,
see no way that was attributed to a bump stock, and especially considering, how many shots are fired consecutively, right? It's absolutely insane. It doesn't even sound like there's time for him to throw a gun down and grab up another one that's fully, right, loaded already and ready to go. So, just in theory, like, it kind of falls apart
yeah.
immediately on its face. let alone the three different narratives that that kind of first the original narrative is that basically the first two narratives were that Paddock was dead upon arrival, and
Yeah.
then kind of insane because you can watch these videos of like people in like the bar area or whatever, and they're like hiding, and you can kind of apparently it's been cross-referenced, and the timing of it all, you hear these 3 shots ring out, and it's allegedly when the cops entered Paddock's room, right? And
Interesting.
so yeah, but it's never been claimed that the cops shot and killed Paddock when he right? And so it's very interesting, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that just the shifting in the narratives, right, which we'll get into clearly in more detail, but just how they consistently were they were completely just contradicting each other, right? These new narratives that were coming out. And Jesus Campos, his version of the
Yes.
story basically changes in each new official version. And
Now, for people who don't know, who is Jesus?
Jesus Campos was the security guard at the Mandalay Bay who was the first to report to Paddock's room before the shooting started, allegedly. W he was apparently responding to an open door ajar alert, right? Which was allegedly what he was responding to, so no gunfire had happened at that point. But, yeah, that was kind of his whole story is very strange, right? And we should for sure tackle that because I think he's one of the most, at least to me, he's very much a smoking gun within this narrative. Although I do think that Marilu Danley is really the smoking gun, which is Paddock's
Yeah.
girlfriend. Yeah, the Filipino girlfriend. But um to start though, I think that it is important for us to at least briefly mention that my entire sort of theory behind what I think took place in Vegas is, I think, linked to Operation Fast and Furious and the gun walking scandal of the ATF, right? And I think that once you realize that there was this federal policy of illegal gun purchases being let go, but like between 2006 and like 2012 or
Yeah.
2011, somewhere around there. Um, yeah, it's kind of like this insane umbrella project for Project Gunrunner. So
Yeah.
Operation Fast and Furious was just one of many different operations, right? So that's kind of important as well because I mean Eric Holder, right? President Obama's Attorney General. He was, of course, the first sitting cabinet member to ever be held in criminal contempt of Congress ever, which I find interesting. And but yeah, of course, the Obama administration was they of course kind of got out of this scandal altogether, right? And unscathed kind of in many ways. But especially given the fact that the all of these guns were allowed to kill hundreds of people, right? And so I think that when you have people like U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, who was killed on December 14th, 2010, and dude, it ended up getting him killed, right? Because Mexican criminal organizations were allowed to acquire enough weapons that they were found at over 150 different crime scenes where Mexican citizens were either killed or just, you know, yeah, it's
Makes sense.
yeah, dude, absolutely, and even um the terrorist attack in Paris, right?
Yeah.
Right, like, dude, it's some of the guns were even used in the November 2015 attacks, and, uh, and so they I mean, the ATF itself tracked the weapons to a Phoenix dealership that was known to be associated with Fast and Furious, so there's really no dispute there. Yeah, and
Well, and
my god, man, like
isn't it interesting that a lot of these people all of a sudden have like no money, right? Like
mhm,
a lot of the more recent shootings, they're kids, right?
Right.
Like what 18-year-old has the ability to get a $1,200 rifle?
Exactly. It's ridiculous to me. It's the same with um this what Ryan Ralph guy, right? Like he's struggling financially, but yet he's going to Kiev and recruiting people to Azov. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? There's
Yeah,
he has this um housing company in Honolulu or something, and it's so clearly to me a cutout. And to me, when you kind of compare the backstories of Paddock and other patsies, yeah, it even if you're an operator, you're still you can still very much be utilized as a patsy, and that's
yeah,
often the case. And I kind of made the point in the last episode of Already Dead with this Ryan Ralph guy is that like he's probably more likely like a criminal asset, right? And so it, it makes more sense to me that he would be a criminal asset hung out to dry than an actual operator within intelligence that's right, like a sort of
yeah,
agent of some kind. So most likely he was just handled and put in the positions he was, meant to be in, and they utilized him until they wanted to perform this little event. But anyway, not to get off
yeah,
subject, I just find it interesting because when you look into Paddock, his companies are very similar to me, especially when you have Paradise Ranch and all of these other things that we'll discuss. But I mean, the official narrative itself, it just completely falls apart. But we
yeah,
should at least address the official narrative to start, probably.
yeah. I was
Um,
actually going to ask you about that. So,
okay.
what is the synopsis? What is like basically just what any mainstream news story or outlet, what would they say?
Okay. So officially, on October 1st, 2017, this mass casualty shooting event occurred when 64-year-old mentally disturbed man Stephen Paddock opened fire on the crowd. I have to stop smiling when I say these things. It's just I think that mentally disturbed man, it makes me smile
Yeah,
because it's just like the same story we're meant to believe over and over. And so the pattern
lone
recognition is,
crazy.
yeah, it's real and it's very much in the forefront of my mind. So I can't help but kind of wear my emotions on my sleeve accidentally. So if you do see me smiling when I'm talking about something very dark and disturbing, don't judge me, please, because I
Yeah,
honestly don't find anything great about or like pleasing or enjoyable about these tragic events. But I do find the official narratives to be just so ridiculous that you kind of have to laugh. Otherwise, you would just, I don't know, be overwhelmed with kind of grief. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Because of the true predicament we find ourselves in. But anyway, so this 64-year-old mentally disturbed Stephen Paddock opened fire on the crowd attending the Route 91 Harvest Country Music Festival on the Vegas Strip from his 32nd floor suites in the Mandalay Bay Hotel. So he fired more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition at about it was 500 yards away, I believe, like
yeah.
490 or something. And yeah, it was over 60 people were wounded, and I believe 59 were killed, I believe. But yeah, killing 60 people and wounding 860 others. And an hour later, he's found dead in his room from what was reported to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And so the motive, of course, it's still largely been, I mean, it's officially undetermined, right? Which that's pretty amazing to me, especially since the feds redacted hundreds and hundreds of documents in reference to the Vegas shooting. And why would you need to do such a thing when the only suspect is dead, right? Like
Right.
it's a little strange to me that unless you're attempting to, of course, hide something. And so yes, that's what I suspect is the case. And so The mass shooting, it allegedly occurred between 10:05 and 10:15 on October 1st, which was the third and final night of the festival. And when the shooting began, it was the closing act of Jason Aldean, I believe. And so this is citing the Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's preliminary investigative report. Shortly before 10 p.m., hotel security guard Jesus Campos was sent to the 32nd floor to investigate an open door alert. He attempted to open a door that provided immediate access to the floor, but found that it would not open. After Campos entered the floor, he discovered an L-shaped bracket screwed into the door and door frame, which prevented the door from opening. Now, I believe there was also a camera that was like positioned on a room service cart that was in the hallway. And that camera was rigged up to a screen in Paddock's room, one of two rooms that Paddock had, by the way, which I
Yeah.
think is very interesting and people don't really talk about very often. And by the way, dude, um, redacted from the official documents are, of course, the three names of these three women who had been checked into one of Paddock's two rooms. And they were officially like it's insane because it was the official room 1315, I think was the room on the 32nd floor. And it wasn't only registered to Paddock, but based on the initial police response, it was also registered to three other women. The first name was Joanne. The last names were all just censored, right?
Yeah.
The second subject was Laura, and the third subject was allegedly Katie. Now, all the last names were removed from the publicly available audio, and they had originally checked in on the 25th of September and were scheduled to check out on October 2nd. And yeah, I just I can't see how, especially how there's like room service receipts that claim that there were multiple people in the room
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that he was not alone. So I think that's very important. And when I did the Vegas Spaces with Mayor Kate and Maze Love, I believe is the other girl's name. They're super cool, but it was kind of weird because there were so many people in the space, but there were only a few key speakers, but then there were others that were clearly allowed to speak and had been I guess involved in these spaces often. But yeah, still there was someone there who was like an official, authoritative official within like the military. I can't remember his position, but
Hmm.
either way, man, I followed him too just because I wanted to make sure I remembered who he was. I put his name down somewhere, but for the life of me, I couldn't find it right now. But anyway, so this
That is
guy,
interesting.
it's interesting because he reported in this space to have been having a party in this set of rooms underneath Paddock's room, the floor underneath his room,
Oh,
on the very night that all of this took place,
wow.
and that he had a gun on his person and was concerned that that the officials would stop and harass him for having a gun. And so he was in the I guess he like fled to the kitchen of the Mandalay Bay at this time. And yeah, but that's as far
Hmm.
as I remember, honestly. But either way, I'm like very weird. And
Yeah.
then there's this Saudi Arabian a citizen who's in Mo or something, who's in the space with me. And he's so there's this, and we'll get to it, but the Saudi Arabian, the Mohammed bin Salman theory behind all of this, as far as him being present that night, at the very least. Um, yeah, he spent a lot of time arguing one thing that seemed a little hollow, and it was the only point that he had to make to kind of like argue against the Saudi connection, which was that isn't how the Saudi royal family would move. And I just don't see how that's
Yeah,
much of an argument, but
I've heard that before, and it's
yeah,
like, but this is like an extraordinary
Yeah.
like situation. This is like I don't know. That explanation doesn't make sense to me because it was very clear that some Saudi royalty was there
And
or
a v at
somebody of
least some high
prestigious.
profile, yeah, very high profile individual who was potentially extracted by helicopter that very
Yeah.
night. That
Yeah.
for sure happened. Okay, and
Yeah.
the security that was around this high profile individual that very much resembles Mohammed bin Salman, yeah, one of them has, an assault rifle that is only given to, like, Mossad, military Mossad agents. It's, like, very unique and yet interesting that goes unmentioned as well. But that's the same group of security agents around this high profile subject who were escorting him through Tropicana or something. I'm trying to remember now. We'll get to it. But yeah, they're all pointing their weapons at everyone in the casino,
Yeah.
telling them all to put their hands in the air. And it's they were very aggressive, which makes sense if there's a shooting, I guess, taking place. But
Yeah.
still, little
So
strange.
so
But
there
yeah.
is one video I found and I thought it was really interesting because it was actually at the top of the list when you
Mhm.
search,
Yeah.
but it gives a really good example of this not sounding like one weapon or because it actually does sound like multiple weapons or
Makes sense to me.
like a high rate like belt fed machine gun.
Right.
And so let's see here. Let me just pull that up real quick. Oh, come on. There it is. All right.
Yeah, dude. Oh, come on. That's when it first started, yeah.
Yep. And it's just pure chaos after that. But I mean, it's just interesting. Any video you listen to, look at is there. I don't understand how you think it could just be like what one AR-15
Right.
or whatever the hell they said it was an AR-15 with a bump stock attachment.
Mhm.
Like
No
you've got
way.
to be kidding me.
Yeah, there's no way, especially the shots that were fired at the fuel tanker that was, across at the airport, right? And,
Right.
there is a lot of different well, there's very interesting theory in regard to that because he was a pilot, right? And he had a private plane, and so, yeah, it's kind of we'll get into that as well, but I should probably continue with the official narrative and at least get Jesus Campos out of the way because that's hilarious to me. You know what I mean? Like, he clearly was paid to run with an official narrative
Yeah.
only once and then go into hiding, right? And
Well,
who
do you remember right when it happened, everyone like knew there was a security guard, but he was actually missing
yeah,
right
they
after the
shipped him off
shooting.
to Mexico at first. I find
Oh,
yeah,
that's
I'm
so
yeah.
scary.
Oh, no, that was afterward. I remember now they put him up in the Dara Hotel and Spa.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah, and they
still
hid him,
scary.
and yeah, and I remember now because journalists were trying to find him, and one had actually gotten a tip.
Yeah,
They went there, and armed security removed them from the scene. Yeah, it's like, "Whoa, whoa," come on, man. Like, that's a journalist. There's no
yeah.
way that's, you know, status quo or sort of just, typical operational behavior unless you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of insane to think that through, but yeah, so anyway, this guy, Jesus Campos, right? He, after he entered the floor and discovered that L-shaped bracket, right? He heard what he thought was the sound of rapid drilling coming from the room and went to investigate the matter. And around 5 minutes later at 10:05 p.m., he's hit in the right thigh by one of about 35 bullets that Paddock allegedly fired through the door of his suite. So
Jeez.
after Campos was hit, he takes cover in the alcove between rooms 32122 and 32124 and immediately informed the hotel by radio and cell phone that he had been shot. Though his initial report, he says he believed that he had been shot with a BB or pellet gun.
Hmm.
Like that alone, what are we talking about here? This if you're shot by an assault rifle in the thigh, are you going to mistake that for a BB or pellet? You
No.
know, I'm just saying, like, if you've ever owned a gun or a BB or pellet gun, you know for a fact that's insane, right? And how is that
Right.
even involved in the story? So, at the same time, maintenance worker Stephen Shuck was on the same floor to fix the door that Campos had reported as being barricaded. So the already wounded Campos encounters Shuck and tells him to take cover. Apparently, he's so wounded by this BB gun that he can't even move. And so Shuck contacted hotel dispatchers over his radio, informing them of the ongoing shooting and tells them to call the police. So neither the Vegas Metropolitan Police Department nor MGM Resorts International, the owner of the Mandalay Bay, have confirmed when information about the initial shooting was relayed to the police. So, the investigative report describes Paddock using a hammer to break two of the windows in both of his suites and begin shooting through them at 10:05. So, right
Wow.
after he shoots Paddock in the leg, this is the official story. He begins shooting. Many people in the crowd initially mistook the gunfire for fireworks. Now, before the shooting began, there were multiple witnesses who reported seeing people lighting a string of firecrackers and just dropping them on the ground, which apparently does happen at music festivals. I don't go to them. I don't know. I guess that makes sense, but almost as if this is what I think happened, right? Because if you're going with the theory that I largely believe is the case from the evidence that I've encountered, right? Like um it seems like a way to precondition the audience for
Yeah.
this a tragic event that is about to transpire. Like, that's sort of what I think is the case is because potentially the initial reaction will be exactly what it was, which is, "Oh, they're just fireworks," and I even heard someone say this when the shots were being fired and first began. Um, some guys just like, "Oh, it's just fireworks, like, chill out." And everybody dropped to the ground
Yeah.
around him, and he's just, like, standing there, like, super confident, but until the other shots begin to ring out, and so but, if you, like, what I think also is crazy is that you can even hear people, like, other people other than this guy who were saying exactly the same thing, who were very skeptical that it was actually gunfire to begin with, but then you have the 3 separate timelines, right, that we're dealing with, and
Right.
Jesus Campos' story essentially changing in each new version, and so, um, I think that essentially, like, what we have to really cover to begin with is really just how much this falls apart officially within the details, because this breaking the 2 windows, like, they don't even contend with the second room, right? They don't even
Right.
contend with, right, the body cams of the officers when they enter the room, which is also very weird because there is some sort of groan that happened, and someone did apparently misfire, right? One of the, officers who initially reported to the scene, they allegedly misfired their weapon and accidentally just shot into the wall or something, or into the ground, I think was the report. But either way, you can hear that taking place whenever they enter the room for the first time, which, by
Yeah.
the way, they stood down initially, which I'm sorry, there's an ongoing mass shooting
Yeah.
Why would that ever happen? Where
And
the
you
authorities
what?
yeah, would be
You
officially told to stand down and wait,
yeah.
right? So, very, very weird, like everything that happens in this story. And so, during the shooting, police officers were initially confused whether the shots were coming from the Mandalay Bay or the nearby Luxor or the festival grounds, and there were multiple reports of additional shooters at other hotels on the Strip, and even, I believe the Hooters, right? I think
Right.
there's a yeah, yeah. There's reports of these armed gunmen running in like dressed in basically security outfits, and they're fighting other security guards, and they came through the back of the Hooters, through the kitchen. And this was
Weird.
also reported. So it's like you have many different things that are happening at this time with multiple different shooters, multiple different gunmen being reported by witnesses. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of confusion, especially with the responding officers. So 1 month, according to Vegas criminal defense, 1 month after the Las Vegas massacre, observers are still looking for a satisfactory answer, claiming the mainstream media has given up on covering the attacks. Conspiracy theorists believe the public has bought into the lone wolf scenario that claimed 60 lives. Now, 8 key witnesses perished in questionable conditions within 30 days of the mass shooting. And this always struck me as very, very like it's a clearly a red flag, and it fits the pattern recognition that we're always highlighting and spotlighting
Yeah.
when we cover these events. And so, um, this is WUC News. And this report says that each of the 8 had something in common besides being present throughout the gunfire. They each knew details of the massacre which contradicted the authorized narrative. 4 of the 7 gave accounts to the media which stated there was more than one shooter. Others died before they could speak out. So we have Dennis and Lorraine Carver. The Carvers perished when the car they were in veered from the road and exploded. The couple from California was killed instantly in the fiery wreck. Miss Carver had told the media of her spouse shielding her from the shooters by spotting a beer locker in which to hide until it was okay to run. After escaping, she shared reports on Facebook, letting family and friends know they were fine, and added, I believe the shooters have gone. A week after the wreck, and the shooters, obviously, is, you know, it's not a very smoking gun statement, but still, she's referring plural, multiple shooters. She could just be mistaken, but anyway, a week after the wreck, which claimed the Carvers, the couple's oldest daughter, Brooke, received her father's cell phone. Through the chaos, Mr. Carver had dropped his phone, and it wound up in the FBI's possession. Reports say phones and laptops of witnesses were taken and erased by the FBI. I think this happens all the time, right? In
Yeah.
any type of event that really transpires like this in public, real casualties. I think that they're never going to that's why all the footage that we see, it's so limited in its visual, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we are so limited, and you already know, like,
Oh, yeah.
we could talk about any high impact event. OKC, what happened to those tapes?
Gone.
What happened? Wait, that's what I mean. It's like,
Yeah, and
my
then they're put under lock and key,
mhm,
put in some sort of, court protection, and then it's
right,
up to a judge, you know?
exactly. Yep,
And
and
it's
who's
like
typically compromised.
yeah, exactly, some
Right.
Soros judge or something.
Exactly, man. Absolutely insane. So it makes sense to me that the FBI would for sure take and erase phones and any sort of, incriminating evidence. But
Well,
then you
then
have go ahead.
what about all of the people who were there who mysteriously died?
Exactly. And this is
Like,
one of them.
what's up with that?
Exactly. Danny Contreras is another one. He was 35 and was killed after being chased by 2 gunmen. His corpse was recovered in an abandoned house after a woman heard a man moaning and called the police. Law enforcement investigated the report, found Contreras dead, and Contreras had posted on Twitter and said regarding the Vegas shooting, "Feeling lucky to be alive. Can't believe I got out of the concert. Two men stalking me with guns."
So for everyone viewing, what we're looking at is actually, I don't know whoever put this together, but whoever did, like, thank
Mhm.
you so much for doing this
No
because this is
kidding,
a
man.
shit ton of work.
Mhm.
But what this is, it's a interactive map to go through and show you everything of all the locations of just everything. Every phone call, every single video, every single victim, every single uh, body camera footage. And the setting I have it on right now is to look at how everything was laid out at the festival, with plus the victims, plus the phone calls. So here's all the exits. Here's where like the stage were, VIP seating, RV, tour bus. Here's where the stage was. And mind you, Mandalay Bay is over here, kitty corner
Mhm.
to the stage. So supposedly, where this cluster of phone calls happened is supposedly where Paddock was, and he was shooting diagonally across the street into the crowd from there, supposedly.
Yes, allegedly.
Now, you can also click on every single one of these, by the way, and go to the phone call itself, which is incredible, by the way. Once again, whoever made this, thank you, because holy hell, this is a lot of work.
It is amazing.
So, I mean, here's all the victims. I do think it's kind of morbid they use the skull and crossbones, but it is fitting.
Mhm.
Um, but what about this cluster? That doesn't make sense.
No.
Just out of nowhere. And there were some that were like pretty far away, if I remember, that also just didn't make sense. But as you had mentioned earlier, oh, there's one right there on that corner, like several blocks away.
Yep.
Let's see. Yeah, that's ridiculous. So they had calls all over the strip. Look at this. Look at all the calls.
Jesus.
These
That
were
is
calls.
insane, dude.
Yeah. So these were calls related to shootings all over the strip that night. I mean, it goes all the way up over to the Las Vegas Convention Center, which is at the other end of the strip. So, I mean, you can just see there was something much larger going on that we were not being told.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems like there were sort of teams of mercenaries that were in Vegas that night. Like, and there's many different theories in regards to that. And that's another reason why you have these witness reports of two separate security teams that were in very similar security outfits that seemed to be fighting each other in combat with
Right.
each other. And yeah, there's no official narrative has ever grappled with any of this, any of these reports. Like they've never even mentioned them, right?
Right.
So I think beyond that, and beyond the witness accounts and the individual witnesses who have the most kind of disturbing takes that discredit the official narrative, of course, s- strangely appearing dead and very shortly after the event took place. I think really the one individual who I like to use as a pivotal example most often is Kimberly Sukamel, right? Because she was like 28 years old, and her death was pretty much made the most public after the event occurred. And she had a post on Facebook because she claimed that, well, first she was uninjured at the shooting, but described to the media the attacks and how they were carried out by multiple gunmen who were firing weapons. And her post on Facebook went viral. And she said multiple gunmen were not just firing weapons in the crowd, but also
Yeah.
pursuing people and shooting them even at point blank range. So,
Yeah,
like,
there's this one right here,
mhm.
report of 2 active shooters on the roof, and I mean, we're all the way over here in at Tropicana Avenue, which is
Which
north.
rooftop is that?
So this would have been the Tropicana.
Oh my god. That's
Yep.
where the helicopter extraction took place. I
Well,
swear to God,
what's
on the top of that
interesting,
roof.
yeah, so what's interesting about the Tropicana
Yeah.
is that there is, I believe it's on the Tropicana, there is a suite that is owned by Saudi royalty on the top. Now it's like an extra floor that nobody can get to except for them. That, like, they paid for it, all of their stuff, but that's what I've heard, is that it's up there on the roof. It's like a
Yeah.
whole extra personal suite just for them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but if you just look at the calls, I mean, so we've got report of 2 active shooters on the roof. Calls from Tropicana basement, the concierge. Let's see. Aunt reports niece said shooter in Tropicana.
Mm,
Uh,
wow.
woman reports man with gunshot wound. Man reports victim with graze wound. Tropicana woman reported injured. Man says son at Tropicana can hear shots above.
Oh
And
my
then
god.
and then here's a video from right outside the Tropicana, made or filmed by somebody on foot. That's a belt-fed machine gun.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, there's no way.
Like, there's no way. That was a machine gun or a helicopter. Plain and
That's
simple.
amazing, man. Wow.
And then, I
That
mean, you got calls over
basically
here.
confirms in my mind that that extraction took place because
Yeah.
like, uh, you just blew my mind a little bit with that one. Like, I was honestly hoping that it wasn't the Tropicana, but that's amazing, man.
But, like,
But
I mean, look, you got a concert goer heard that there's a shooter in the lobby, and this is the Excalibur.
wow.
So, concert goer reports hearing shots at Excalibur. And I mean, this goes all the way up the strip, all the way north. Now, this huge cluster over here, this all makes sense, right? Like, if this is
Mhm.
where it happened, that all makes sense. Some of it doesn't make sense, but most of it does, right?
Right.
Suspect related van located. What the hell? I've never even heard of this.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, people were detained, I believe. This van was, I remember this van was specifically important to the responding authorities. And yeah, they had, I'm almost positive they had actually detained these people for a moment, at least briefly, and that reports of them being detained were actually, went public and surfaced. And
Yeah.
if I remember, but yeah, I can't remember the details though. But not surprised at all. There's report, dude. You can, those witness reports alone is a rabbit hole when it comes to this narrative.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of, it's absolutely crazy. And it was less than a week after Sukamil tweeted that she was found dead in her Apple Valley home, I believe. But yeah, a seizure during sleep allegedly for
Oh, convenient.
yeah.
I
And
mean,
even
last I
the
checked, I think there
uh,
was like 38 people who had died.
that's crazy. It is insane. And even Jason Aldean's, I think his attorney who represented the festival actually, um, and Jason Aldean himself was he died as well, according to Nashville media. And it was like reported that after the massacre, he and before his death, he had told a friend that his meetings with MGM and the police and the FBI were strange and complex. And he was, of course, privy to insider information, which potentially the feds didn't want him to disclose publicly, which is kind of the theory surrounding his death because he was, you know, it was
Yeah.
it's possible that he just died in his sleep, but you know, I mean, we're very aware of what they're capable of when it comes
Yeah.
to right? Like if you don't know about the heart attack gun, just go look into the Warren Commission. It's like, come on.
Yeah, and
That's
that's
just what we
old,
know
you
of.
know?
Yeah.
Like, that was, like, long before, like, I was ever even thought of as an idea to be alive, and that was,
Exactly.
like and, I mean, they even outside of that, that's not even, like, the scariest stuff they had back then, you know?
No.
Like,
No,
that
it's
was
not.
just what they were willing to admit to,
Exactly,
because,
man.
like, the church committee was guaranteed a limited hangout, that was
Oh, yeah.
just, like, "We're busted, we've gotta come out and, do this song and dance so we can get back to work behind the scenes." Like
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, Gerald Ford, who was the individual who replaced Nixon, right?
yeah,
And who at first initially replaced Spiro Agnew, Nixon's first VP, who was forced to step down because of all of these. He was accepting bribes, and yeah, basically he had been having sex with a call girl who was exploiting him in sexual blackmail, and he told her pimp, who was then or told a mafioso named Joseph Nesline, who then tells the pimp to basically go take care of Pat Adams, who's then taken out to the woods and murdered. And that was Nixon's initial VP, which I find insane. But who
yeah,
replaced him? Gerald Ford. And then
yeah,
Gerald Ford then goes into office after Nixon's forced to step down, and he essentially heads the Warren Commission. And guess who he appoints as his vice president? David Rockefeller, who he, of
yes,
course, runs the Rockefeller Commission. So there you go. The cover up is in place. The JFK
yep.
assassination will not come to light. And that
Well,
I
and
think,
what's
yeah,
crazy is that, Rockefeller tried running for president and nobody wanted him,
right.
he was a Rockefeller, nobody wanted him,
Exactly.
and actually of all people, Ted Bundy was actually a delegate for Rockefeller that year
Wow.
at convention. It
That's
was the
amazing.
the second year that he ran, and what's even more interesting is that supposedly, uh, Ted Bundy was working for the Republicans at the time, and he was a spy stealing MK Ultra documents out of
Stop
uh,
it.
the University of Seattle's uh, like psychological department, and he
Wow.
actually lost an opportunity at a job because somebody saw him steal the documents, and
Oh
this was
my God.
all before the church committee and everything.
That is amazing.
Yep.
Well, Howard Hunt, who was one of the burglars at Watergate, he had actually allegedly there were these Cuban intelligence files that basically dealt with all the details involving the individuals involved in the JFK assassination,
Yeah.
and that he had acquired these Cuban intelligence reports during the Watergate break-in as well, and also they had broken into the Cuban embassy, which I think is important because there's a multi-layered reason for doing all of that. But Howard Hunt was essentially blackmailing Nixon during this time. Even his own son, St. John Hunt, says that he calls it the Nixon Hunt War.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, yeah, and basically what happened is after the break-in went public and the first five and were arrested, Howard was told to flee by John Dean, right? Who's a White House counsel. Yeah. And so Howard flees, but he flees with incriminating documents for his own benefit in an attempt to
Yeah.
desperately blackmail Nixon. And so he's blackmailing Nixon, but through an intermediary who was his wife, Dorothy Hunt. who
Wow.
was essentially the pay mistress and was paying off the first defendants for the Nixon administration at the time for John Dean. And they tried to go through Douglas Caddy, who was the original attorney, to try and compromise him. Very interesting, and he's kind of a sketchy individual, but yeah, I think that when you get into all of that and you realize that Dorothy Hunt and the plane crash that happened, that the tragedy, and within a week, Howard Hunt throws himself at the mercy of the court and pleads guilty, you wonder why. And she
Yeah.
allegedly she was on this plane with a media representative. I can't remember her name now, but her boyfriend was a CIA agent, by the way. But anyway, they were going to go public with all of this information, and they said as much. And Dorothy was basically threatening John Dean and the intermediaries they were using to try and pay off Howard and these people and the other burglars. And
Jeez.
yeah, and
I
then this
mean, none of
plane's
this
taken
surprises
down, man.
me.
The plane's
N
taken down in midair and crashes
Wow.
into a neighborhood, and within minutes, over 50 FBI agents are on the scene of the crash site, and they have no
Convenient.
jurisdiction over this crash. The FAA
Convenient.
the FAA investigators replaced immediately by one of Nixon's appointees that he can trust. The cover-up was immediate. And yeah,
That's
anyway,
insane.
I'm sorry to go completely off topic, but
No,
it is
no,
nuts though.
I
Yeah.
actually think it is relevant though, and the reason why is I love studying all of these things that have happened that we know for a fact have happened, that we can prove have happened,
Mhm.
because it makes incidents like this make a lot more sense about how the intelligence agencies and how our government actually behaves. It's like,
Exactly.
well, this is what they've always done. This is what they've done for 100 years, and probably earlier than that as well.
Yep.
So when we look at situations like the Vegas shooting, I I think it proves at least that, for one, it's not what we were told. They
Right.
are lying to us through their teeth. I don't know if they know what it was or if they were involved. All of that is yet to be known,
Mhm.
but it is proven without a shadow of a doubt that it is not what we were told. What
Right.
the mainstream media told us is a lie.
Exactly. And I think, man, like once you consider, like, I always found that woman who was walking around telling the concert goers, "You're all going to fucking die,"
Yep.
just before it all started. And I always found that story to be so important. Just feel like there's something more there. And then you discover that there were these 3 additional women who were actually, assigned to Paddock's rooms. It's just absolutely insane. And
Yeah,
the
and
actual
his
room where
girlfriend,
yeah,
that doesn't
Marilu.
make sense.
Absolutely insane. And The Independent published that article about that woman, at least about the witness, and different witnesses, at least telling or, you know, providing the account of this woman allegedly saying this to the
Yeah.
concert goers. And so it's important because her name was Brianna Hendricks, and I remember watching the video, and I was convinced this girl was not lying to me. You know what I mean? Like, I was
Yeah.
very much convinced of that. And, so it was less than an hour before the shooting started, and this woman in the crowd is said to have yelled the warning about 45 minutes before the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival, shooting began. And
Wow.
so, after her outburst, it was claimed the woman and her male companion were made to leave the venue by security. And less than an hour later, that's when the attack began. And so, Brianna Hendricks, this witness, said the woman had been behaving strangely before her outburst. Miss Hendricks, who had been in Vegas to celebrate her 21st birthday, told this to Mail Online. She said, "There was a lady who came running up behind us in the concert, and she started to play with people's hair, acting crazy. And she told us that we're all going to fucking die. She said they're all around us, and we were going to die." Miss Hendricks said the woman had claimed her boyfriend could not breathe in order to push her way through the crowd to the front row. She said, It seemed she was telling us to either warn us or she was part of it, and she was telling us because she knew we were going to die. It was so scary. It felt like she had knowledge of what was about to happen.
Yeah. I mean,
My God,
I do.
man.
Yeah, and that is an extremely odd detail in this.
No kidding. She
Like,
finishes her statement by saying that she returns to the Mandalay Bay to the hotel about 15 minutes before the shooting and witnessed the subsequent carnage from her hotel room. She is quoted saying, "It makes me feel uncomfortable. I thought it, the woman's warning, had a correlation to the shooting." She described the woman who gave the warning as Hispanic, probably about 5'5" with brown hair, and said the woman's boyfriend was also Hispanic. The authorities have yet to comment on whether the woman's warning was just a bizarre coincidence or whether it actually did have something to do with the mass shooting. Nuts,
well,
right? Like that
yeah.
that woman's story, Brianna Hendricks, that one always stuck out to me. I can't
Has
remember if I clipped it in my Vegas episode, but I
so
know some
is
go
she
ahead.
gone? Like,
I don't know
where is
what
she?
her story is now. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't followed up with her, to be honest, because I don't think she was one of the individuals who was killed,
Yeah.
actually.
Huh.
So, yeah,
Interesting.
very interesting.
Because it makes me wonder if that's who she really is. It makes me wonder, like,
Right? Like
I
the
don't know,
9/11 guy.
yeah,
Yeah, it just
like,
all started on top of itself because the jet fuel and like,
yeah, it's like,
you son of a bitch.
I mean, here's the thing is
Yeah.
going through all of this stuff, just like all the subjects that, you and I have both talked about,
Mhm.
that we've both learned about and talked to each other about, like, I have gotten to a point, I do not believe in coincidence anymore.
No,
Like, I just don't.
no.
Like, you have to think about it. The sheer mathematical probability of a genuine coincidence is so astronomical that it's truly like a 1 in like 5 million chance, you
Yep.
know? So these things that we call coincidences, they do not happen all the time.
No.
A genuine coincidence and this might be one. It's possible,
Yeah, it's always possible, I guess.
but it's unlikely, I would say. But it's like, who the hell is this woman?
Right,
Maybe she is just this drunk concert goer saying some crazy shit, because we've all seen at least one of those,
right.
whether it be in real life or on video or something. So
Mhm.
I don't
The
know, but that
timing
is
of it
weird.
all, yes,
Yeah.
the timing of it all is what leaves me so skeptical, right? And
Yeah.
I don't know how you couldn't be, especially when you any one of these events, like we continue to say, you scratch the surface barely, right? And
Mhm.
you realize it all opens up to you, and you've come to find that every single time we've been led to believe something, right? It's been a manufactured lie and a false narrative, right? To keep us in the dark. Now, why would they attempt to do such a thing? You know? And
Yeah.
so then I come to find, go a little deeper than that, right? Because it,
Yeah.
it tends to be that there's even more of some layered underlying presence of ideological, influence that you never even thought was possible, you would even have to contend with being a possibility, right? That's
Right.
something that I've now discovered, that there seems to be like some sort of it's more than just the facts of the matter. There's some sort of spiritual aspect of this, and this sort of like, and I'm not trying to take us in some sort of completely deranged, area but I'm just saying, like, it does feel like, especially when I'm coming off the heels of this Hitler and the occult episode, like,
Yeah.
there's always some other underlying influence that we've yet to grapple with and contend with, and most often, we aren't even aware that, these lines of influence and ideology exist in the first place, and that's probably because you're a decent person. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's it's very much been a covert war waged on on really just our psychology, our mental perspective and outlook on the paradigm we exist in, to very much have us kind of, ultimately just become these naive and childish beings who can't quite interpret anything that doesn't fall within this black hat, white hat, you know, binary paradigm that is very just like I said, it's naive, right? And
Yeah.
and it takes a lot of effort to get that veil to fall, but once it falls to the side, it's all you can see, right?
Yeah.
Is and so yeah, I think it's very important to get to that point, but I also think that it takes reading stories, like Marilu Danley and her involvement with Stephen Paddock in the Vegas shooting that makes you really question reality, in general, especially when, like, this woman, all right, who's allegedly dating this 64-year-old white deranged man, she's apparently was initially police said that they had located this woman who was connected to Paddock, right? And Clark County Sheriff Joseph Lombardo, he later revealed that it was Marilu Danley, but also that she was in fact out of the country and in the Philippines, not believed to have been involved in the shooting. And I guess also it's kind of strange that leading up to the shooting, just before all of it took place, he had bought her a ticket to go to the Philippines. This story. And then right before all of this transpires, he wires her $100,000 and basically tells her to buy a house. And so when you come to find who Marilu Danley is, and also it's kind of crazy because she was apparently a high limit hostess for Club Paradise at the Atlantis Casino Resort in Reno. And this was according to Eric Paddock, Steven's brother. And he says that's where Marilu and Steven allegedly first met, was at this Paradise, Club Paradise. And she's a high limit hostess, apparently. Now, when you come to find the business that they run together has the same name, it's very interesting to me. And so, Clark, so he told reporters, the Clark County Sheriff, that we have located her out of the country. She was not with him when he checked in, Paddock, to his Mandalay Bay hotel room. We have discovered he was using some of her identification. We have had conversation with her, and we believe her at this time not to have been involved. It was later revealed that Paddock even rented the rooms under Marilu Danley's name, using her ID. And the Australian National, they reported that the girlfriend of Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock claimed she worked for the FBI on a loan application. So
Weird.
there's an investigative journalist named Riva Mendoza, and she reported that Marilu Danley, whose fingerprints were also found on Paddock's hoard of ammunition packed into unused rifle magazines, told the Consumer Credit Reporting Bureau that her place of employment was the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The True Pundit, when contacted Friday at this time, I don't remember the date of this report, but one FBI source said the Bureau might have made payments to Danley, but it is above my level, the source said, referring to access to the FBI's confidential informant participant and payment records. The source said bosses are concerned with the new revelations about Danley's financial relationship with the FBI. Court documents revealed suspicious emails between Stephen Paddock and Marilu Danley, starting on July 6th, 2017, when Stephen Paddock used the email address centralpark1@live.com to send a message to another account named centralpark4804@gmail.com, belonging to his alleged girlfriend Marilu Danley. The first message read, "Try an AR before you buy. We have a huge selection located in the Las Vegas area." Later that same day, Marilu's account responded by saying, "We have a wide variety of optics and ammunition to try." Paddock's account replied, "For a thrill, try out bump fire ARs with a 100-round magazine."
Oh, isn't that convenient?
So it later surfaces that in the 70s, Marilu Danley had been a fighter with insurgents fighting against Marcos in the Philippines and was most likely a longtime CIA asset. So her name was originally, at the time, Marilu Ocampo Natividad, and they called her May Escrita Fighter. She was subsequently sponsored by Carl W. Ford Jr., the Chinese analyst with the CIA, to gain entry to the United States. Why the hell would this be a coincidence at this level,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Reuters.
No, that's not a coincidence.
No.
That's happening for a reason.
Yeah.
Straight up. Like,
It's absurd to me, man. And
well, and what
go
do you
ahead.
think of the theory that like Paddock was like running guns or
Oh yeah.
like he was doing something
Yep.
shady as
I
shit,
think it was
maybe
even
a
more.
drug trafficker, and
Yeah.
and there is the theory that that's what he started out as and then got involved in some Epstein
Why would
children
he
of
not?
or fan of the playground stuff.
Right. But I mean, it's like, why would you not utilize your asset who's running guns to
Yeah,
utilize your asset to run drugs at the same very I mean, why would he not be able to, multitask and
well, it would just
accomplish
be
all 3 at the
whatever
same
the deal
time?
was about, like
Exactly.
he was a smuggler, and it
That's what it seems like.
seems
The
likely.
video poker is what? A
Mhm.
convenient front to launder the money. That's what it seems like,
Yeah.
right? There's a
Yeah.
reason he didn't want to be a high roller because he was there for one purpose, you
Yeah.
know?
Well,
And
and
there's also a reason they all claim there are claims he was a drunk or whatever. He was struggling financially before all of this and lost a bunch of money.
I doubt it.
That's not yeah, it doesn't align with the reality of it because it seems like he made a bunch of money on properties he owned just recently, and, he was doing just fine. So it's,
Yeah.
then you also have the insane false narrative that they tried to attribute to him as far as motivation was concerned of this retconned letter that they only allowed, of course, 10 letters or something to be admitted into court, and none of them had actual correspondence with Stephen. It was just one-sided from the letter sender to Stephen. So you never got a response. You didn't know what Stephen said. You had no idea what the context of the conversation was. But of course, one of these 10 letters happened to say, "Stephen, I really think you should get help. You probably need to see a therapist. I'm worried you're going to do something crazy."
Oh my
Um,
god.
yeah, yeah. And so to me, it feels like it was perfect timing with it being a sort of manufactured narrative after the fact, right? You have this, of course, you go to find that this guy barely knew Stephen Paddock, and really like it essentially falls apart when you pry
Yeah.
into it at any level of depth. And
Well, and
so, yeah,
what
go
was
ahead.
up with his brother? There was
Oh my gosh.
the computer connection where they found some,
Yeah,
some CP, which
right.
supposedly I just saw recently that he was cleared of all charges on that,
Yeah, very
which is also
convenient.
weird.
Yeah, exactly.
But
It seems like he I mean, very much could be a way to leverage him to play ball and not, fall outside of the official narrative. Or I'm not entirely sure why else he would get off on those charges, because especially when you have Stephen Paddock's dad, all right, first of all, was a man by the name of Benjamin Hoskins Paddock, who was apparently known as a bank robber and a con man that escaped from federal prison on December 30th, 1968, landing him on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list, where he would stay for nearly 10 years while living under numerous aliases in Oregon. And so then there's this weird, interesting connection that we at least should mention, which is the fact that Stephen Paddock's three brothers, that one of his three brothers, Bruce, happened to be arrested in North Hollywood in late October of 2017, right? So the same month that this event occurred, he's arrested. And so these charges that he was arrested on were of possessing over 600 child pornographic images. So the charges would, now to me, it's like, were they like, this is so soon after the event takes place. Were they just immediately trying to force him into place, force him to play ball, force him to maintain the official account of these events? Or it's just like, I'm trying to consider why else the timing of this would take place in the way that it did, because it's so strange that the very same month they would tap him on these charges, you know,
Yeah.
like any other time. And so the charges would then, of course, like you said, be dropped in May of 2018 after this judge seemingly intervenes on Paddock's behalf, on Bruce Paddock's behalf, by denying the prosecutor's request to postpone the case because a witness was unavailable. So Paul Akins, a spokesman for the LA County District Attorney's Office, he claims that this left prosecutors unable to move forward with their case against Bruce Paddock. So this story almost perfectly aligns with this insane theory I found while digging a little deeper into the background of this Patsy and his links to Silkway Airlines, which to me presents itself as a potential human trafficking operation based out of the Philippines. And so this theory posits,
Yeah.
given that he stopped working in the 1980s after leaving the deep state defense contractor Theocal, the most
There it
obvious
is.
question is, how did Stephen Paddock make his millions? We know he owned 2 planes and had a pilot's license. We also know that his main company since 2004 is called Paradise Ranch, a joint venture with the Philippines Children's Fund of America. It smells like Laura Silsby, man.
Yes.
A charity that provides a transitional home for American children we fly from the Philippines. Now, strangely enough, there is also a Paradise Ranch in the Philippines, his partner's home country, Marilu Danley. And this Paradise Ranch is right next to a former U.S. Air Force base in the Clark Freeport Zone in Angeles City, a very well-known site of large-scale sex trafficking. So the obvious question becomes, did Paddock make his millions as an ex-CIA pilot running a human sex trafficking ring out of the Philippines? Because it seems like he was probably an Operation Fast and Furious asset as well, who was smuggling weapons and most logically drugs, right?
Right.
And it's even worse than all of that, because there's so much more evidence to, like, the Silkway Airlines, for example. Political Veilcraft has this insane documented report that looks a lot closer at really his ownership of these 2 planes, and this basically this well-established fact that these planes are associated with a company named Volant LLC, which Volant Associates is none other than a Department of Defense contractor. Oh no. And, and
Wow.
yes. And October 18th, 2017, um an article was published with the title, CIA Creates Las Vegas Massacre Reality Show as shooters
What?
information. Yes, as shooters information leads to takedown of ISIS leaders. Reporting, allegedly at the same time the CIA continues its narrative fixing meme about the Las Vegas massacre, CIA gunrunner Stephen Paddock's Filipino girlfriend Marilu Danley provided pro-Trump forces with vital intelligence about Paddock's arms deliveries to ISIS terrorists in the Philippines, enabling the Philippines military to defeat the remains of ISIS in the war-torn city of Marawi after their troops took out two leading members of the jihadi network. So,
Hmm.
after which Danley was placed on the U.S. no-fly list, preventing her from leaving America. So, to the truest understanding of CIA gunrunner Stephen Paddock's arms deals with ISIS terrorists in the Philippines, as it relates to the Las Vegas massacre, began in July in 2017, the very same year. Remember when Trump came into office and said, "Hey, let's stop supplying the arms and weapons to the
Yeah.
ISIS safe haven we're providing in Syria, the
Yeah.
eastern safe haven that we're providing ISIS, our moderate rebel terrorists in Syria, because of Hillary Clinton's phenomenal strategy that she called the bank shot strategy, right? Hey,
Yep.
we'll take all the moderate rebels that were actually Al Qaeda, ISIS, jihadi terrorists. We're gonna take them and we're gonna pivot them, since of course they're our guys. We're gonna pivot them from overthrowing Gaddafi in Libya with by anally raping him with a dagger in the street, right? And he
Yep.
allegedly says, "What have I ever done to you?" as he's dying brutally. And he was trying to what? What did he was trying to go off the French dinar, create his own currency.
Yep.
He was trying to do a lot of different things. He was nationalize the oil and reserves and
Well,
yeah, a
and
lot of
what's
different things.
interesting,
Mhm.
Gaddafi was one of the only things standing in between Europe and an invasion of people from that part of the world, which
Absolutely.
look at everything now.
Look at
Look
it
at
now.
look at the UK,
It's
look at
amazing.
Ireland, and now, places like Springfield, Ohio,
Yeah.
like, and this
My
all
God.
came, and I'm not claiming that like Gaddafi was a good person by any means,
No, me
but
neither. Yeah.
he was respected and feared in that part of the world, and he
Yeah.
controlled a lot, and he was keeping things kind of under control. And it's
I'll
kind
never
of like,
forget. Go
uh,
ahead.
just real quick, it's just kind of
Mhm.
like like the devil you know versus the devil you don't. So like you take out a dictator in any part of the world, and all of a sudden his predecessor is like 10 times worse,
Oh, yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like,
And more often than not, it's some sort of installed patsy that's of course some sort of Western asset that,
yep,
completely just rules with the policy that's the antithesis of being, something
yeah,
just good for the people in the area. And that's always the case, we're just exploiting it. What did they call it? What's the name of that book? It's so good. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. It's
yep,
very similar, right? It's like this is how they wage war in the 21st century. And we need to get with the times with understanding, fourth and fifth dimensional warfare and how they we probably it's almost as if we won't know World War III is taking place, although it's happening underneath our own noses. Is probably more likely the case because it's like we're in the digital age.
yep,
You see you see this footage happening in Ukraine of like these. They're like trying to hide in this, burnt up car that was bombed already from a drone that's like hunting their ass down. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You see in Gaza where that dude who's just walking and then he gets drone bombed and then the drone comes back around and he's crawling trying to save himself and he just gets struck and then completely massacred and he's just a citizen, you know what I mean?
yeah,
But this is the modern age of warfare, and it's it's kind of sad that we've been so desensitized in many ways, and it's really just this matter of distancing the people from the consequences, and yeah, and then of course leveraging the propaganda at all times. But yeah, I think that this CIA, LLC, Volant, which is clearly just, a Department of Defense contractor that he's basically working for at this time. Um, it's even worse than that, right? Because it seems that really there were like holdover officials embedded within Trump's presidential administration in 2016, allegedly, and at this very time in 2017. This is kind of a part of the story that I think you get into the weeds because there is a difference within political administrations, and they're always trying to consistently maintain power from the outside looking in. So they're always trying to leverage their people inside government, to continue their policies, whether they're in office or not. If you're an elected representative or your intelligence asset,
Right.
which I largely think that most all elected representatives are compromised by intelligence in many ways. And we can go even deeper than that when it comes to like, New York City detective James Rothstein, who says that, after investigating for years and years, human trafficking operations, he says that over 70% of United States elected representatives are compromised by sexual blackmail, and that's what he and his colleagues came to find. And he's the guy who arrested Frank Sturgis on his way to assassinate Marita Lorenz. Very crazy
Huh.
story. Yeah.
So, real quick, I found this, which was
Mhm.
really interesting. Redondo Beach man jailed in Philippines claims he was victim of crime syndicate. This man
Wow.
right here, who happens
Redondo Beach.
to be a Paddock, Harold Roland Paddock.
Stop it.
Yeah. So
Wow.
60 says in emails to the Daily Breeze from I don't know where the hell that is, police station jail in General Santos City, that Filipino media reports alleging he molested two girls when they were 8 and 13 are unfounded and libelous. Basically, I've been kidnapped and held for ransom, but the twist is the crime syndicate / terrorists have enlisted the police to do the arrest and detention part of it. Then they do payoffs when the extraction or extortion money comes. Paddock wrote in emails received Sunday night or Saturday night and Sunday.
Wow.
So
That is
that's
insane, dude.
interesting. And apparently he was trying to board a plane going back to Bangkok, Thailand, which is a notorious, child trafficking
Oh, yes.
location.
That's,
So yeah, like another Paddock just gets arrested in
right.
the Philippines for child trafficking.
Mhm.
What? And I don't know if you knew this because I sure didn't, but apparently Stephen Paddock's dad
Yeah.
was a bank robber.
Yeah, FBI Most Wanted for over
Yeah.
10 years.
That is the craziest shit ever.
Mhm.
I had no clue.
Escaped from prison, lived under all these aliases for
Yeah.
over 10 years, was on the FBI's Most Wanted list. It sounds like he could have been compromised from day one.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
mean,
like,
Paddock
honestly.
diagnosed as psychopathic, has carried firearms in commission of bank robberies. He reportedly has suicidal tendencies and should be considered armed and very dangerous.
My God.
Like,
That's so crazy, man. Yeah, he was discovered living under some entirely different name, and people, respected him. He was very well respected in the community when they found him. Yeah, that's
oh,
that's
that's
the
so
story.
weird.
It's very weird. And, but that point that I was making, though, allegedly in July 2017, that's when these supposed Obama holdover officials within Trump's administration granted air rights, U.S. air rights to Silkway
Oh,
Airlines, Stephen Paddock's
interesting.
airline. Yeah. And so Silkway Airlines, it is an Azerbaijani state-run cargo airline that was
Oh,
exposed. This thing was exposed, though, in February of 2017 as being a major carrier. And listen to what happened to the investigative journalists who exposed this racket. It's so insane. So it was exposed in February 2017 as being a major carrier for arms to terrorists that it hid in diplomatic cargo, and whom Bulgarian investigative reporter Dilyana Gaitensheva documented the CIA was a major customer of. and that after making these revelations, she was interrogated, tortured, and then fired from her job for linking the CIA to Syrian terrorists. You remember the white helmets?
Yeah.
You remember Assad's gassing his own people. Can you believe he's
Yeah.
using sarin gas? And then you come to find out that it's actually our guys that were working for the NGO.
Yeah.
What the fuck? And Seymour Hersh exposed all of that at the time when it happened, right? Which is
Right.
very interesting. And of course, another one that just goes down the memory hole that everyone collectively forgets, and if they ever knew of in the first place, because you typically have to be plugged into these insane threads of investigation and research to ever even have it come across your radar, right?
Right.
And so, upon President Trump being alerted to these former Obama regime officials approving Silkway Airlines flights in the to the U.S., apparently FBI forces loyal to him revealed that an early June 2017 flight of this airline landed in Chicago and was met by look, Chicago, right? Where did Obama's administration come from? So it's kind of like making
Yeah.
this strange link to these holdover officials, how they're operating their kind of, crime-ridden syndicate that, of course, is just entirely linked to government because that's how organized crime operates now. It's just government, right?
Yeah.
People need to understand that.
Same
Is that
thing.
yes, exactly. That government and organized crime have been working hand in hand
Yeah.
since from ground zero. I mean,
I mean,
honestly, like
what's funny about that, not funny as a haha, because none of this is funny, but
right.
like once again, you got to laugh, like you said, because otherwise your
Lose
head
our
will pop.
minds.
But what's interesting, so like the OSS turns into the CIA, right? And
Mhm.
at the time, they know that they have to get black or like funding for all of their black operations,
Right.
and they can't go to Congress for this. And so who do they go to? They go to the mob,
Exactly.
because that's they have to enter the criminal underworld to be able
Mhm.
to raise funds for what they want to do. So they
Exactly.
effectively have to become criminals to get this money out of nowhere, so they
Man.
can go overthrow governments in other countries and all of these things. And it's just insane to me. It's like, and what I find funny is that, like, at the beginning, they were really, really bad at their job.
Right.
And so they had to be like walked through like how to do all of these things. And mind you, like these guys that started the CIA that ended up being in the OSS after World War II, like
Mhm.
these were like hardened warriors,
Oh,
like
yeah.
1,000-yard stare motherfuckers.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and so they're like being babied basically by these mafiosos. And what do you think the mafia got out of it?
Mhm.
Connections, favors,
Oh, yeah.
because that's the thing that nobody really talks about, is like bribes and stuff. It's not money. It always comes in favors.
Exactly.
Remember that time I did this thing for you? Well, I'm calling in
100%.
my favor. Like, that's how the corruption happens.
There's no doubt about that, man. Absolutely none. And, I mean, honestly, dude, like, to that point, government is just so clearly, to me, always been just the highest level of organized crime, you know?
Yeah.
And I think even Dave Smith put it one time, he said, government is the highest level of organized crime dressed up as a human rights organization. And I just that is
Yeah.
absolutely perfect. That's
Yeah.
exactly what government is, you know? And and but Douglas Valentine, he said he noted this in his book called The CIA as Organized Crime and How Illegal Operations Corrupt America and the World. And he basically explains in that book that the government's cooperation with the mafia during World War II led to its expansion after the war and set the stage for its future collaboration with U.S. intelligence agencies. Top government officials were also aware that the government's Faustian pact with the mafia during World War II had allowed the hoods to insinuate themselves into mainstream America. In return for services rendered during the war, mafia bosses were protected from prosecution for dozens of unsolved murders. The mafia was a huge problem by 1951, equivalent to, well, basically, kind of equivalent to the hyped up terrorism, you know what I mean, narrative
Yeah.
that happened in the early 2000s. It was very much similar, but unfortunately, it was based in reality when it comes to organized crime and the mob and their influence in government. But um, it was essentially became a protected branch of the CIA, right?
Yeah.
And what Valentine claims is that it, which was co-opting criminal organizations around the world. He says this is what the CIA was up to by 1951, that they had already been co-opting criminal organizations around the world and using them in its secret war against communism, which is always the justification. If you look at any of the most insane policies and covert operations that they've ever conducted that we're aware of and that has
Yeah.
surfaced at any level, their justification becomes communism, right? I mean, Roy Cohn himself, Roy Cohn says that, oh yeah, of course I was compromising politicians with sexual blackmail from children,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah. I mean, he
we had to stop
blackmailed
communism.
he blackmailed J. Edgar Hoover
It's so
successfully.
crazy, man. Yeah. It
Yeah. It's
we cannot it, we just have to stop believing in the orthodoxy. We have to just opt out, right? That's the only way in
yeah.
my mind that we have a fighting chance, is to opt out and discover the reality of the paradigm we truly exist in. And so of course the mafia collaborated with the government, for decades. Like
Yeah.
why would that not have been the case? And but anyway, so what I was thinking though about at least finishing that story about Dilyana Gaitan-Shiva, that insane investigative journalist, because when she linked this Silkways Airlines to this CIA, smuggling operation to Syrian terrorists, and then was subsequently tortured after being interrogated and lost her job and everything. It was very sad what happened to her, but then Trump's alerted to all of this allegedly taking place, and pretty much what inevitably happened was this flight landed in Chicago and was met by known associates apparently in June 2017. It was met by known associates at the O'Hare International Airport, of the feared Las Vegas-based Russian mafia leader Razdan Shulaya. So
Wow.
this man, apparently, is who these same FBI forces quickly put under arrest, along with nearly his entire criminal organization. And on August 1st, a Silkway Airlines flight from Dubai was scheduled to land in Chicago, but whose arrival was delayed until August 3rd due to mechanical issues, and that upon its arrival, an American man named Stephen Paddock arrived at the U.S. Customs Gate of O'Hare International Airport. So the FBI linked
Wow.
both Las Vegas-based Russian mafia leader Razdan Shulaya and Las Vegas-based Stephen Paddock to these Silkway Airlines arms delivery cargo flights directed by the CIA and arriving in Chicago. And SVR, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, their analysts, this report says they needed no mental exertion at all to quickly determine that they were both part of an international arms smuggling ring and who were able to launder their millions of dollars of profit in the American gambling mecca they both called home.
Wow. I
So
mean,
that
uh,
makes sense in the context of Operation Fast and Furious and gun smuggling and Silkway Airlines and Stephen Paddock and actual organized crime, syndicate leading official named Razdan Shalaya, officially
yeah.
being connected to that as well, and they're all using Vegas as a money laundering scheme.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to me, it's no doubt in my mind that there has to be a gun smuggling operation at play within the context of the Vegas shooting, right? Now, I don't know. He only had 23 weapons allegedly in his room, if I remember.
Yeah.
And but according to you know, like they knew, they were aware, according to, I believe, Jesus Campos' cousin, that MGM Resorts International was fully aware that he had weapons he was taking up to his room, which that alone is very suspicious, you know? Is it
So
typically allowed to take over 20 some odd assault rifles up to your room using the private elevator and
right.
actual employee at MGM Resorts? It's probably, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know.
I mean, it is Vegas, you
That's
know,
true. That's true.
and there's a lot of people that will do a lot of things, especially if you know, throw them $100 and
Dude,
just say,
yeah, if I was working
you saw nothing."
yeah, if I was
You
working
know?
in hospitality in Vegas and
Yeah.
I had to just take people's bags up to their rooms, like, yeah, you probably just wouldn't
So
ask too many questions.
yeah, oh, I wouldn't ask a single question of
That's what I'm
anybody,
saying.
because I don't wanna get involved in something that I don't wanna be involved in, you know?
Exactly, man.
Now, I found this, just cruising through some search results, but
Mhm.
this a post on 4chan, so take it for what it is. But it did say the Las Vegas Metro Police Department knows the motive behind the attack, but the FBI will not allow us to release the motive because it implicates the FBI in illegal arms
Of
deals
course. Oh my
and
god.
supplying arms to ISIS terrorists within U.S. borders. Stephen Paddock was an undercover FBI agent. Well, he was probably a contractor, most likely,
Yeah.
who participated in multiple illegal arms deals in the Las Vegas area in a gun running entrapment scheme similar to Fast and Furious. Because
God.
it would make sense that maybe it wasn't Fast and Furious per se,
Yeah.
but that there's
Project
multiple.
Gunrunner, the
Yeah,
umbrella, right? The umbrella
exactly.
project that we mentioned, that fits perfectly, man.
Yeah, and
Like,
then
there Go ahead.
Paddock thought he was engaging in another routine arms transfer, but ISIS had learned about the entrapment scheme and Paddock's true identity. They killed him and carried out the massacre and then fled the scene.
I
Everything is
heard that
being
before.
kept
Now
under extreme wraps.
Right. Now that's the part of the narrative I question. Only
Yeah, same.
because yeah, yeah. That's the only, part of that narrative that I always kind of remain skeptical toward, because I don't know if it could have very well have been the case, and to me, it
Yeah,
smells, I mean, it really does just fit, it fits perfectly when it comes to the operation and the guns being in the room, and also the reports of the sort of security groups of security that were, fighting, at the same time. But what I heard is that Paddock was kind of pre-positioned to be there, and he was under the wrong impression that it was a typical arms deal, but that basically he was being set up, right? And
yeah,
that he was killed before any of the shooting ever started. That's what many people claim. And they say rigor mortis was even setting into the body. That's people who claim that they have knowledge of what happens to bodies, as a result of death, and this specific type of death, and also like how the blood would pool, and all these different factors, claiming beyond the fact that there was, I believe there was a tattoo, then there wasn't, or something like that. There's these very interesting um, crime scene photographs that were allegedly completely different, and they
yeah,
looked like it's not even Stephen Paddock in some of the pictures, according to certain people. And so I'm not at all surprised, as well as they say that there were no casings on the ground, right, at all. And so it didn't
right.
make any sense, as far as it looked like the room had been scrubbed to a certain extent. Beyond the fact that the blood pooling, I believe there were also some very, suspicious details within the blood pooling aspect of, like, I can't remember anyway. It's been a while now since I really read over those crime scene details of Paddock himself. It was really kind of a thread I left kind of unattended because I didn't really take that direction when I was covering this as far as,
Yeah.
but I definitely am under the impression that he was killed before the shooting took place and that this all happened, you know, either they wanted to commit some sort of mass casualty event and this provided the pretext for it, or the perfect context for it to take place with the operatives in place. But then you have to contend with the Mohammed bin Salman factor, and how
Right.
this, especially the timing of the Saudi purge, which happened immediately after Vegas,
Yeah.
which people are apparently they just act as if this is entirely unrelated, and I don't see how that's possible. I just don't. Hey, do you mind if I go pee real quick? I'll be right back, dude.
No, 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 not at all.
Cool. Cover some. I'll be right back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's see. Let's take a minute. One thing I wanted to do real quick. I haven't done this in a minute, but everyone make sure and go check out the show's sponsor, which is Nadu Shave Co. This is absolutely the best razor that you could possibly ever get. I mean, I use it even though I have a beard. I do use it to clean up my cheeks, underneath, my neck and everything, my neckline. And there's a reason why single blade safety razors were the standard for so long. There was a reason why all of our dads and granddads used them, because they just are the best without a doubt. Now, these companies, Gillette, Braun, Harry's Razors, Jeremy's Razors, even, these companies absolutely can't stand you. They absolutely will sell you China-made pieces of shit. Nadu Shave Co. is veteran-owned and family-operated. They source the highest quality materials for all of their products. I highly recommend them. You can go to nadushaveco.com. Use promo code RISE15 to get 15% off at checkout, and let them know that we sent you, and you will not be disappointed. It's look, like, I am not going to do an ad for a company or a product that I don't believe in. I highly believe in it. So go check them out. You will not be disappointed.
What's up, buddy?
What's up? So let's see. I found this. I've never seen this before, but this just brings a whole other, like, side to this whole shit show. But this is what Israel National News was reporting around the time of the shooting. That according to an unofficial report from Rashid Bet, the Las Vegas shooter's name is Samir Al-Hajabib. So, I mean, I don't know who the hell that is. I've never heard that name in the context of Vegas. But hell, that could be a interesting rabbit hole to go down. And why the hell would they be reporting on anything? I mean, other than like what just like the official narrative would be reporting. But then again, we know how our media works. They don't tell us shit. So anything outside the US, is usually more truthful, depending on the source, or at least it gives more information. But I just thought that was kind of a weird thing. Like, the Israeli National News is reporting the shooter's name. Like, I've never heard that. That's crazy.
No kidding. There was another report that I never heard of either about this attorney named Matthias Chang. And he's like, basically he says that, well, this is considered like 2 days later on the 5th, right? As far as on November 3rd, 1 month after the massacre, there was this missile that was intercepted by the Saudi military. And this is when the purge, what really began, was 2 days after this, which was basically a lot of people were suggesting that it was this final effort by the anti-King Solomon faction to
Mm.
take him out, basically, and that so 2 days later, on the 5th, is when this massive raid on the Wahhabi-aligned Saudi palaces took place, and a handful of the anti-Solomon faction were killed. 10 princes, including Al-Walid, were held for 80 days at the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh. And according to that attorney, Matthias Chang, Saudi Prince Al-Walid admitted under interrogation that he had sent an elite team of snipers from the Saudi Royal Air Force to the Mandalay Bay Hotel on the night of the Las Vegas massacre. And in an email, screen captured and uploaded to Twitter, so take it for what it is. But Chang details how the Saudi prince sent snipers to the Mandalay Bay to occupy the floor above Paddock's room, which makes sense why there were actually accounts of muzzle fire and muzzle flashes being reported above Paddock's room. So it's very
Hmm.
possible. Yeah, it's at least possible. But
Yeah.
I do think that really, when you consider like Catherine Lombardo, who a lot of people have attempted to discredit, but I see no reason why. She was working for lawyers. She was basically lawyers for the injured. This woman was attorney Catherine Lombardo, and she launched this civil lawsuit against and investigation into the October 1st shooting, and she was basically right when she asserted that MGM Mandalay Bay Casino paid Jesus Campos for his silence, set up the public relations stunt on the Ellen Show, which was coincidentally
Yeah.
owned by MGM Resorts International,
The
her
only
network,
interview he did.
the only interview, and then rushed their security guard Jesus Campos into hiding. And the Baltimore Post Examiner, they revealed that Campos was paid for his silence, signed a non-disclosure agreement, and that the Ellen DeGeneres TV show appearance was scripted. The BPE also claims that in an interview with brother-in-law of Jesus Campos, the brother-in-law confirms that MGM booked the TV show appearance, that Campos was flown to the TV show by MGM, and that the walking cane that Campos used on TV was just a prop, that MGM
What?
gave him a rental car, provided him yeah, provided several hotel suites for him and his family at the Dara Hotel, and that MGM did in fact hide Campos in a condo in the Las Vegas area. The most
Hmm.
shocking confirmation came when Campos was reported as saying that the hotel security staff knew that Paddock had weapons inside his hotel room. So, yeah, Luis Castro was the name of former brother-in-law of Mandalay Bay security officer Jesus Campos. And in December of 2019, he basically says that Jesus Campos told him that MGM Resorts International knew that gunman Stephen Paddock had suspicious amounts of luggage and guns in his room, but security neglected it because of his high roller status.
Hmm.
He said Campos signed a non-disclosure agreement with MGMRI, so this is his brother-in-law. Campos received an all-expenses-paid trip and gifted 2 condos where he could reside. MGMRI hid Campos under guard at the Dara Hotel and Spa after the October 1st massacre for protection, where his room and meals were provided. Now, this odd story gets even more strange and unusual when reports surfaced tying Campos to the Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center, where he had gone for his alleged stress therapy, which had once been a prominent facility used in the CIA's mind control program, ran by Louis Jolyon West as a part of Project MK Ultra. But
Wow.
not like there's any more MK Ultra connections to Stephen Paddock or anything, right? Oh
No.
no, I think there are.
Oh, you're
It-
telling me that Jolly West comes up in some MK Ultra related thing? No way.
right, exactly. So this
Wow.
that Ken wrote an article on this, right? Which I
Yeah.
found a while back. And when I was doing this episode, I was so excited because it just like it was from the perspective of like this prostitute that was hanging out with Paddock at the time. And basically, Ken wrote and published this in Headline USA, by the way. For anybody who hasn't read it, go check it out because it's amazing. And it's not too long either. And you can quickly just read it. And then it links to, I believe it even provides a link for an original article that made some of these claims as well. And so in the aftermath of the 2017 shooting, there were reports that gunman Stephen Paddock had told people around him he was a government experiment and would often lie in bed moaning and screaming in mental anguish. A link was provided to an exclusive archived article stating that a prostitute last seen with Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock just before his deadly rampage has mysteriously vanished. The Sin City escort was reported missing by her boyfriend several days after the October 1st shooting. A former sex worker who once dated Paddock and is now cooperating with the FBI told Radar in an exclusive interview. She was telling girls after work that she was scared something would happen to her, claimed former escort Michaela, whose full name is being withheld to protect her identity. She was booked the day before or the day of the shooting before she disappeared. What's more, Radar has learned just before the rampage, Paddock began sending bizarre text messages to another of Michaela's call girl pals. There's messages where Stephen is telling her he's a government experiment and that they are listening to everything he says and does, and they can hack into his brain and take over, Michaela said.
Whoa.
And you already know, dude. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Robert Duncan, all these different sources who claim that this modern Manchurian operational technique can essentially, they say that post-hypnotic suggestion really does work and is relied on more often than not than microchips and brain implants. They say those they work very well, but they prefer to rely on post-hypnotic suggestion.
Yeah.
Now, there's also theories that, and very credible, they're not just theories. There's many examples of essentially they can utilize frequencies, right? EMF, so electromagnetic frequency. They can utilize to effectively use techniques of mind control, right?
Yeah.
And it's very scary when you get into those weeds because you get into DARPA military applications to a lot of these things that we all act as if they're these innovative products that came in, were first you came onto the scene in the marketplace with these like wonderful intentions that are attempting to move society in in a, let's say, forward and that and progress in this positive direction. But it's it really seems like almost every example you can find it all began with the military application, and that was the true intention behind the creation of the products in the first place, was the capacity of how they could utilize it militarily. And so I mean, you have like the DARPA HIMEMS program where they're weaponizing mosquitoes,
Yeah.
and
Which, by the way, I've done some more research into that. One of the first tests of infected mosquitoes was actually in my neck of the woods out here at Dugway, Utah, which is a chemical and biological research military center, which also helped Edgewood Arsenal with
where'd the anthrax come from?
Yeah. In fact, Dugway
gosh.
actually got busted sending live samples of anthrax all over the world.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was crazy. And just to give you a perspective, Dugway Proving Grounds out here is the size of Rhode Island.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 800,000 square miles.
That is insane.
And it's so hush hush out there. Like it's just the craziest thing. So yeah, one of the first mosquito experiments took place out there. I actually found pictures of it recently. I'm getting ready to do an episode about these patents involving MK Ultra. So that should be interesting.
That will be amazing. My gosh, man, it's really insane. When like I was doing research on the Cabazon Indian reservation and its relationship with Danny Casolero and the octopus and
Oh yeah.
Wackenhut, the private mercenary operation, basically that was really kind of exploiting Cabazon in many ways. They were basically using the um, the Native Americans there as slave labor. They were
Yeah.
bringing in Mexican nationals to cook meth. Yes.
Of course they were.
Yes, it's amazing when you look into let alone testing, like, advanced weaponry like the rail gun and stuff like this,
Yeah.
chemical weapons. I mean, it was really insane what they were up to there, but, um, to finish that point on Paddock and MK Ultra potentially, there's just, like, a couple other details that I think kind of, you know, at least, add a little credibility, which is that the FBI released a trove of records in March of 2023, and it seems to be somewhat related to the claims of Paddock and mind control because the new heavily redacted FBI records show that a special agent interviewed a worker at Mesa View Hospital in Mesquite, Nevada, about a week after the October 1st shooting. So the agent apparently asked the Mesa View worker about rumors that Paddock had been on a psychiatric hold, which is when a patient is being mentally evaluated, often involuntarily. So the heavily redacted FBI memo says redacted told redacted that Paddock had been at Mesa View on a psychiatric hold and that
Mm.
redacted. The FBI memo also says that a hospital official sent an email to employees instructing them not to search for Paddock's medical records. The name of the official who sent the email was redacted, and no more details about this incident are included in the records.
Wow.
Additionally, the FBI memo discusses who Paddock's sitter may have been. At Mesa View, somebody is required to sit outside of the room where the psychiatric patient is being held. Redacted also heard a rumor that Redacted had sat with Paddock, the FBI memo says. Paddock's rumored Mesa View trips were first revealed in December 2017 when the Las Vegas Review-Journal reported that law enforcement issued a search warrant for all of Paddock's medical records from the facility. There were also media reports from 2017 about Paddock being prescribed diazepam, a sedative hypnotic drug. It's one of the
Wow.
MK Ultra drugs, and so
Yeah.
I think more than likely, there's some sort of connection with some sort of psychological programming, and especially when and I know that I'm, you know, it's kind of my confirmation bias at this point is that it seems like the pattern is largely in the vein of hypnotists, mind control. It really does feel like MK Ultra goes back generations, and that we are really under a false impression that it began when Operation Project MK Ultra began because, you know, what else is a shaman? What else
Yeah.
is, like, I mean, they called it a magical spell back in the day, but in reality, it's called hypnotism and mind
Mhm.
control. And there have been many different techniques that have been pretty much just perfected over time. And especially when you consider that we have all these covert intelligence operations that are specifically tailored toward how can we control the outcome? How can we control the psychosis and right of the masses, to be honest, is really the ultimate goal. Let
Yeah.
alone how can we actually program an individual to become a Manchurian or something of which it clearly we know this is possible. And how many times can we point to people like Sirhan, who obviously was a hypno-programmed Manchurian who was shooting blanks in the pantry of the Ambassador Hotel when Thane Eugene Cesar, the security guard, moonlighting as a security guard, point blank range,
Yeah.
fired the shots into RFK's back of his head. I mean, it's so obvious that it's possible. I don't know how effective, which it's very obvious that I mean, clearly they had to have Thane Eugene Cesar fire the death shots, but still, it's effective enough to provide a distraction and get everyone to believe this false narrative for generations that this upset Palestinian was outraged by sending, bombs to Israel or fighter jets or something at the time, and that RFK had allegedly agreed to do. It's really just a false narrative again. So I don't know how many times we can point to that, but let alone, right? I just mentioned how Paddock potentially has these ties to basically this psychological mental institution, and it's even more insane than that because it seems to be something that's consistently happening when it comes to large events in history, right?
Yeah.
That there tends to be this controlling hidden hand that is entirely unrecognized. And I think that once you research the Tavistock Institute and you're right, and
Yeah.
the Frankfurt School, and you start to begin to understand social engineering and how they truly manipulate us psychologically, it's it's very scary because I'm honestly I'm under the impression now, and I just mentioned this on Already Dead, but coming off the heels of my most recent episode, I'm very much under the impression that Hitler was psychologically programmed at a mental institution in Munich, and that Tavistock was largely responsible and working with
Interesting.
working along with the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and they called themselves the Invisible College, right? And it really does seem like there was something at play. I think Trotsky and Stalin were also involved, and that it could have been this sort of program the actor um, um, type of dynamic. You have the actor, the ideologue, and I think that largely this was sort of like because you also have to keep in mind Hitler. I didn't know about any of this, but there's a book called Hitler and Walk, and there's another book, The Man Who Created Hitler. Um, there is legitimately a psychologist, a psychiatrist, who was actually allegedly committed suicide, and all the clinical records were destroyed. And this is
Hmm.
the same place and the same physician or psychiatrist that worked with Hitler. And so it's pretty amazing when you find out that he has these visions, and he answers to a voice that he says is from another world that he calls Providence.
Wow. I mean,
Yes.
that sounds like some of this technology. I mean, just like the patent I have on screen right now,
Mhm.
method of changing a person's behavior. Like, and supposedly this is a patent to do it through like a VHS tape, like Clockwork Orange style, like peel your eyelids back and force you to
Exactly.
watch it. And I mean, if you see the date on that's let's see, June 5th, 1988. And I mean, they go back way further than that.
Right.
It's
That is amazing.
it's really interesting. And honestly, this is why I decided to focus on MK Ultra, even though it kind of seems like, at least in our circles, it's kind of been overdone.
Oh, yeah.
However, I don't genuinely think it is. Also, I was thinking about it. Even if it has been overdone, everyone needs to be repeating this until everyone understands. Like
Absolutely.
the implications of what these technologies and what MK Ultra was and did is like I can't believe there wasn't a revolution after that.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I don't even know what to think about it, honestly. And so that's why I, for myself, has decided to start there and just kind of branch out, because
Right.
I've noticed everything loops back.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's the craziest thing. And there's always some aspect going back. Like MK Ultra rules all around us. And I mean, there's evidence reaching all the way back to ancient Egypt with
Oh,
mind control technology and techniques and stuff. Like, and it makes sense because no matter like yeah, the LSD stuff, like even the Manchurian Candidate stuff, like the desire for some people to want to control other people
right.
as like a fully autonomous slave is like almost as old as humanity itself.
It really is, man.
And
I believe that
yeah,
wholeheartedly. Yeah.
and I mean, I've gotten to the point like the 5G system, it's a weapon system.
I
Like
feel the same way. Yeah. I
there's no
mean,
way that
EMF alone,
technology. Oh yeah. Yeah.
disrupting our REM sleep, like completely destroying, the natural state of how we're supposed to function. Just
Yeah.
on the most basic level as human beings. And we wonder why, we are the most disease-ridden, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
society. It's like, beyond the right. I mean, how much we could really point to the diabolical plan of pretty much poisoning all of us to death, in a very Monsanto. I mean, how many times can we point to the processed food complex of just destroying the well-being and health of the nation and really global society?
Right.
Because one, it works hand in hand with big pharma, right? So you just have these sick individuals who are operating at a very low frequency that aren't, you know what I mean, that are
Yeah.
consistently sick and disease ridden and unhealthy and can't seem to function just at a basic level, and that is by design in my mind, right? And much easier to control a population who one isn't even beyond the fact that, of course, they're trying to feminize men, and there's clearly an agenda there. But I mean, the revolutionary class has been weeded out. It's essentially just been destroyed. There's
Yeah.
no threat to the establishment.
Yeah.
I don't
And
see it
that was done on purpose.
by design. I see
I mean,
no way
same
around that.
same thing happened in China during during their revolution. Although
Yep,
theirs happened a lot quicker, this was more of the long con, you know.
exactly.
I mean, Yuri Bezmenov warned us of
4
this.
stages of ideological subversion, my
Yep,
friend.
and I think we've gone through the 4 stages. This is probably the 3rd time.
Yeah,
So,
no doubt. No
like
doubt.
we are now in the like demoralization period
Mhm.
again because I mean, we've already gone through that a few times.
Yeah,
And I think
the
they were just
long march, you know?
yep, they
Yep.
were doing it until there was no way to come back out of it. And although I don't believe that it's hopeless because I'm actually more white pilled than
Yeah,
ever, which is so
agreed.
weird after just like this conversation we've had. And
Mhm.
we'll start wrapping up so I don't keep you too long. But I just like I'm way more white pilled than I've ever been, but
Agreed.
it's at the same time it's like obviously there's no political solution,
Right.
you know. Like it
Yep.
doesn't matter. We are arguing about who's going to be the manager of the United States of America Inc., you know.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be an employee anymore. Like I
Mhm.
quit.
Exactly.
Like fuck this.
100%, man.
So, yeah, it's just crazy,
Man.
but I agree with you. Like this keeps coming up like
Yeah.
all the time. Secret societies, cults, child stuff, and like MK Ultra brainwashing. Like those are the 4 constants in almost any story if you go deep enough.
Exactly. Which why is that the case?
Yeah.
Like, I'm so desperate to answer that question, but it seems just to be the most useful, the most reliable, techniques that have been basically perfected over time, like we've been saying, but you dig like, what I find most perplexing about all of this is you take a moment out of your time to question the official narrative briefly, and this entirely new world of of first of all, you're just granted this unique window into the reality of the situation, which is it's always much more complicated than it's boiled down and concluded to be, right? The easy narrative that is easily digestible. But when you dig a little deeper on your own, you discover, well, maybe Hitler was a male prostitute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's so many different narratives at play there that you have to at least consider, and I mean, they're not just ridiculous theories of speculation for the most part. They're the things that I rely on, they come with receipts. I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's legitimately an affidavit, right? And you can reference Samuel Igra, who is the author of Germany's National Vice, that there is essentially an affidavit in the possession of the diplomatic representatives of several governments in Vienna that declared that Hitler had been a male prostitute in Vienna from 1907 to 1912, and that he also practiced the same calling in Munich from 1912 to 1914. So
Wow.
Hitler was in Vienna in 1913, where in the same year there also lived Leon Trotsky, Yugoslavia's eventual leader Marshal Tito, Sigmund Freud, and Joseph Stalin, who, according to Greg Hollett, who's another author, they were also Illuminati agents of war who attended the Tavistock Psychological Operations Training School in 1907.
Wow.
It gets crazier than that too, but I'm telling you, this is not really unique, honestly. It seems
Yeah.
like every one of these stories, it's so extraordinary, but it really does seem like psychological programming is a very effective tool. And I
Yeah.
don't see how any of these, there's such impactful events, these high impact events, especially a world war. You think something like that is left up to chance and that individuals aren't prepositioned into place? I cannot see it. I understand wartime strategy. I understand, it's like, but this is there's something else happening that I think is largely being just completely unacknowledged, and people just aren't aware of the true dynamics at play. And honestly, how power even functions, you know?
Yeah.
And that's something that I think we need to desperately try and at least do our very best to expose more people just to the actual dynamics at play here and how power operates, because I just see so often people fall into the trap and are really misinterpreting that any of these actors that are politicians are really behind much of any of these policies. I don't think they read the legislation, you guys. Like, I
Yeah.
think we can point to that, but
Yeah.
they'll proceed to attempt to pass it and using the language that, is just so immoral and unethical and deceptive. And people just fall for it over and over.
Yeah.
But that's my ultimate issue, is that there is no political solution, like you said earlier, which is the perfect way to put it. And but you know what? That can be liberating, man. It shouldn't be this, like,
Doom
it
and
shouldn't be
gloom.
the prison. Yeah, the ideological prison that you
Yeah.
kind of make it out to be. This is like a voluntary choice of your perspective and outlook. And I think that it really is more liberating than anything to have the veil removed and to witness the true paradigm, and just to know that it's
Yeah.
possible to achieve some sort of liberty and sense of liberty in your own life within the own the context of the relationships that you try and just put any effort into, you know attempting to, at least, it better be worthwhile, is all I'm saying. And I think that until you're aware of the true paradigm, you tend to waste a lot of your time, right?
Yeah.
And so a life worth living, right? And having your time, kind of being applied to something that you feel like is worthwhile. I think so many of us lack passion. We don't have a vision forward. And that's where you have so many, you kind of become dangerous, because you tend to lose hope. And what kind of vision for the future is that? And it's self-defeating in many ways, and I just think that that's kind of a baked in intended response, and we have to fight that. We have to reject that at all costs because it's so absolutely not will I allow them to achieve victory over my mindset and psychological outlook. And so I think that alone, just through exploring these different narratives and trying to expose yourself to more details and information, it's not scary. It's important and pivotal to becoming your own person and liberating yourself from the prison that you're intended to remain in for the rest of your life. So that's kind of my goal, man. That's all I'm saying, right? Is
Yeah.
all I continue to do is try and really just understand in a more comprehensive way, right? Like,
Yeah.
how are these things actually taking place, right?
Well, and
Because go
you
ahead.
know what? One thing that's just crossed my mind a lot, I've been just repeating it to myself lately, is because like I've seen people get lost in this space, like I've seen people go down a rabbit hole and never come back,
Oh yeah.
or like take a handful of red pills, and then just like go straight Q,
Oh
and
God, yeah.
it's like, and it's like you have gone so far down the rabbit hole, you are now right back to believing the CIA, like
Right.
so. But the one thing I've kept telling myself, especially just being around this and literally reading about it and researching it all day, every day, is you can't do anything about it.
Right.
Like, I am powerless to stop a lot of this stuff. And what should I do about that? Well, I can't really do much other than try to scream to people like, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Here's all the evidence I've been able to find. And I understand people don't want to do the research. I have the time to do so. That's why I started my show.
Right.
It's like, and so I'll do it so other people don't have to. They can have, the easy aspect of just already having it, right?
Yeah.
And outside of that, what I can do is focus locally.
Yep.
I can focus inside my home first and foremost. I can take care of my family. I can, get rid of all the toxic shit that's in my house, all the cleaning material that we use. I just read something coming out of Australia that laundry detergent is the most toxic thing in our house.
Wow.
And it's like, we all buy it, we all use it, and we wash our clothes in it, and then we wear our clothes constantly. So our skin, our largest organ, is just absorbing all of it,
Wow.
And so the fight has been taken to our home. And like, I don't care who's really in office. I care the fact that, my family's being poisoned, my friends are being poisoned. That's something I can do. I can take care of that, and while that's not going to stop this cabal of criminals that have taken over almost every institution and, are both have sock puppets of the left and the right, like, it's not going to stop that. But what we can do is we can make friends with people who also realize these certain things. And we can also create like liberty enclaves, and we can have communities and be able to function without these people. Because the only solution I truly see, because I want peaceful solution. I don't want a civil war. That's stupid. Besides, the state understands the language of violence. They understand that. They're going to know how to respond to that. They don't understand how to respond to peace.
Right.
So what we can do is we can opt out. We can just say, instead of trying to fix the system, I'm just not going to participate.
Exactly.
I'm going to grow my food. I'm going to hang out with my friends, and I'm going to have a good time, and fuck you. And I'm going to try and figure out how to not pay taxes,
Exactly, buddy. That is my ultimate goal right now, is just we have to continue to network with like-minded individuals. That it's been such a blessing just being in this sort of community, mainly because, man, it does make you feel so much better to not be alone in these ideas, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
and
I've felt alone a lot, so
100%, man, and but that is what ultimately motivated me to really begin the show, was I felt so isolated during COVID, that and living out in Los Angeles, and it was a nightmare. But meeting the people that I have within this community has been, I'm just so grateful because, like, I haven't met anyone that seems to be acting on bad intentions. They honestly, man, like, not one person I've yet to meet that seems to be acting in bad intentions and attempting to, harm anyone else's credibility, or like, put you in some sort of, you know conversational trap so they can, hopefully,
yeah.
you know, uh, uh, make you look to be, some sort of ridiculous, I don't know. It's just, I'm glad, very happy, and very grateful that the people I've met so far in doing the podcast have just been like, just very kind-hearted and genuine people, authentic, you know?
Same.
And that's what's rare, is that I think it's mainly due to what we're obsessively passionate about and what we talk about specifically. It kind of seems like we all are very similar in many ways, with just the bottom line principles in certain ways, and when that's the case, it's kind of hard to have these, like what I mentioned earlier, when you lack purpose. When that happens to you and you're in this kind of nightmarish, situation that you've yet to understand, probably identify, and especially you haven't contended with it. But I think it's very hard to feel happy for other people, right? It's very hard to be grateful and just have a positive perspective. And so you become, just a real part of the problem, and it leaves you, man, leaves you very, very vulnerable for bad ideas, you
Yeah.
know, and it's kind of the cultivating grounds, and that's, you got to buck that trend. You have to break out of that system, and it's something that I had to fight against, because if you ever feel like you should be accomplishing more with your life or anything, I mean, it's just figure out a way to apply yourself in that direction. That's the only way. And I'm not, just the very least, so you can feel more fulfilled. And
Right.
you just inherently become a better person through that goal, just attempting to achieve that goal alone. The process, I think it kind of builds character. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm definitely very, very grateful for, one, just the knowledge and information I've accumulated over time. Like, I feel like it's just, that's freeing in itself, because you feel like you can kind of, like, craft this more, like I said, comprehensive outlook, that you don't feel. What's more scary is when you're very confused and in the dark. You can't quite make out what is happening. I think
Yeah.
that's more scary than actually realizing what is occurring. So I don't know, but thank
I
God that
I
I'm doing.
actually agree with you. I think it's, I mean, not to say that it's not scary at all ever, because it
Right.
has been. Like, the implications of, like, the things that we talk about,
Mhm.
it is bone chilling, like, it's just, and I see why people would rather reject it. However, that's just adding to the problem.
Yeah.
But it's it's really interesting, and we'll finish up with this, but I found recently, since you mentioned Sigmund Freud, um, something that happens in our culture, our society, that I find really interesting is when people are called crazy,
Mhm.
right? That wasn't always a thing. Like that wasn't like, oh, you're crazy. Obviously the conspiracy theory thing with the CIA weaponizing that.
Right.
But now both of those have kind of melded together. Well, the ability to call somebody crazy, as in just so flippantly called them that, just write them off like they're crazy, so I don't have to listen to you. That actually happened because of Sigmund Freud. He was the one that started that.
My God.
He was the one that pushed that. Before him, that didn't happen. Of course, people have always been called crazy to some extent, but it wasn't part of the social lexicon to where it is now. I mean, I get called crazy at least once a day on Twitter or X or whatever, I bring up smart city and digital ID stuff, which is coming. And I get told I'm crazy that they would never corral us in a city and not let us leave. And it's like, they would never. Well,
you go read the benchmarks of Agenda 21 and 2030, man.
Yeah.
Natural asset corridors.
Yeah. They openly talk about it. I've got a whole list of patents where they have microchips, the injector, the way to track us like cattle, like it's all there. And I just find it interesting that calling somebody crazy came from Sigmund Freud, whose nephew later became Edward Bernays.
Edward Bernays. Oh my gosh. That's so nuts. And you know that Edward Bernays, I believe, his son or grandson, I can't remember. I had to have been grandson or something, but I can't remember which individual in his family. But it's another one of them who runs Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah, it's his grandson.
I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah,
like,
and they work with the Obamas.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's amazing. It truly is. But propaganda has been such an effective tool, right? And and just the two-party illusion and it's really just kept, like I said, it's kept the revolutionary class castrated, just at bay.
Yeah.
Right. And if we're leveraged against each other, and if we're just consistently leveraged against each other over these false, these ridiculous, bloated, what are we going to discuss today? Is it another nonsensical, ridiculous argument about abortion, or is it, you know what I mean? It's like, we need to honestly grapple with what affects all of us, and that is the power dynamic in the system itself, which is inherently corrupted. To do what? To imprison us in this totalitarian technocratic system, which inevitably is the goal, is totalitarianism. I mean, and what's so sad is they kind of have created these like little totalitarian authoritarians within each of us individually, to where there's like this subconscious effort to rule over your neighbor, and it's embedded within a lot of people, I've noticed. And that
we saw that during COVID.
Yes. And I think the Prussian model is really largely to blame for that, of mass conscripting, citizens into the Prussian model and of American education now, which of course Horace Mann's to blame for. But you can at least, it's not one individual, but the godfather of American education, who went over to Prussia and studied the Prussian model and said how great it was, when what was the king was just like the Prussian king said that these sort of border disputes, he would conscript the peasants into a fighting force, and then throw them on the front lines, and they would shit themselves in fear and run away saying fuck this, because they had no loyalty to the state. And they go, oh my God, well, how do we solve this? We got to get them young. We got to get them as children. We have to conscript them and brainwash them from cradle to grave. And have they not achieved that, right? To honestly an extent that I think was unimaginable at the time, right? I just can't even imagine that they thought that they would become this successful with this model, But my God, it's kind of a brilliant system if it weren't so disgustingly evil, It's like,
that's where all the MK Ultra stuff starts with, the GATE programs, which targets the smart kids and the special needs kids.
Oh yeah.
And then all
Definitely.
of a sudden, you're already in the system, and that's how they filter through all of us. So, I mean, we're all
Crazy.
victims of that.
Yep.
And, you know, and then it comes once again under the guise of national security. We're doing it because the Russians are gonna hurt us or the Chinese are gonna hurt us because
Mhm.
that's once again always the excuse for
Right.
everything they do.
Right. Yeah, the moral justification when it's inherently immoral.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm sorry, like, I don't give a shit what the Russians are doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So, it's
same.
insane, but
Well,
my
hey,
god,
Austin, I could talk to you forever. I'm sure we
same, buddy.
definitely could. There's so much to the Las Vegas thing that we didn't even cover, so I would like to get you
No,
back at some point for a part 2,
absolutely.
and we can just cruise through that map because, man, I mean, there was stuff on there I'd never seen, never heard of,
Yeah, I'll
and I'm
give it a real, like, legitimate look through,
yeah.
for part 2 before coming on for part 2, definitely, because it when you pulled up that Tropicana part of the map,
Yeah.
that freaked me out, man, I'm honest. Like, that helicopter story is
Yeah.
really amazing, and we could talk about that next time, so
Well,
I'm
and dude, you get
for
to the
sure.
other side of the strip with those calls, and
Mhm.
it's strange, like, there was somebody, I can't remember what casino it was, but they found, like, a Glock, right, that was highly modified. It was an automatic
Oh my
Glock with an
gosh.
extended clip, right,
Wow.
just laying on a casino floor, and
Mm.
they gave it to a cop because it's like, "Here, this nobody should have this, like, here's a highly
Wow.
modified Glock," just
What the
laying
hell?
laying around, probably like a $2,500 handgun or
My
more.
gosh, man.
So,
What was
there's
going
just
on
so
in
much.
Vegas that night, you know?
Dude,
Like,
I
it
have
feels
no
like a larger operation than we're aware of, you know?
right,
Because it does feel layered. It just I can't make sense of so many different things happening in so many different areas,
right,
and the reports the timeline of the reports are just they're extraordinary, man,
yeah.
but
And then why are
absolutely
there
don't
calls at
align.
the north end of the strip? Like,
Exactly.
why are there victims 4 blocks away?
Yeah, and no
How did they
one
get
on
that far?
earth should be mistaking being stalked by multiple gunmen
Yeah.
on the ground level.
Yeah. Or see armed people on the roofs
Yeah,
or,
it sounds
multiple
a lot more than
multiple gunshots from all sorts of different
64-year-old.
directions,
Yeah.
black helicopters who turn off their tracking system.
Yeah, the transponders go dark.
Yep.
It's amazing. Yeah, it really is, and no way does it align with the official narrative,
No.
and no way does it seem like one mentally deranged 64-year-old man,
Yeah,
you know, committed
yeah.
this on his own,
He's
but
he's not John Rambo, which is what would have to be
yeah.
if that was the case, and it still wouldn't look this fantastical. So, but hey, let everyone know where they can find you.
Alright, buddy. Yeah, anywhere you can basically find me anywhere at the Underclass Podcast. Go subscribe to the YouTube. I'm doing my best. YouTube's giving me shit. Of
Always.
course. Yeah, yeah. I guess I violated their terms with my Pizzagate episode. But and the reference point was like literally the Laura Silsby story, which makes
Oh,
no sense. Like, okay, man. But
okay.
anyway, yeah, but
And
um
you did cover the Vegas shooting.
yes, I did. Yeah. I covered the Vegas shooting. It's about an hour, I think, for that one. Yep. And yeah, that's an insane one. It very much gives me kind of this deja vu of what I felt with James Holmes. It was very
Mm.
interesting. Yes.
Yeah,
But
we'll
anyway,
have to touch on that at some point because
absolutely. But
yeah,
other than that, yeah, subscribe to the YouTube. And then you can support me at Buzzsprout or Patreon. If anything I've ever done resonates with you and you feel the need to, I would absolutely appreciate it. But yeah, beyond that, follow me at Underclass Pod on Twitter and at the Underclass Podcast on Instagram.
hell yeah. Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and doing a 2.5 hour show. That's
Jacob, you don't have to thank me,
definitely
brother.
great.
Thank you for
Well,
having me on, man. Honestly, I really appreciate
anytime.
it. It means the
Anytime.
world to me,
Honestly,
buddy.
I enjoy having good conversations with people who understand, and also people who can look at something and have a different perspective. I mean, these situations are so complicated. There's too much for one person.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still learning stuff from back when MK Ultra was,
Yep.
found out about. Like, although I think these days he might be more of a limited hangout, but like Tom O'Neill's work with Chaos and stuff, like that's just incredible. The fact that we're still learning
Yep.
about like the Manson case. There's just
I
too
know.
much for one person, a group of people. It's gonna
I
take
thought I covered Manson, and
yeah.
then I went and did the Process Church and
Yep.
the Ultimate Evil episode, and I was just like, "Oh, no."
Yep.
I didn't even begin to understand what Manson really may have been,
Yeah.
and that's just amazing to me. But anyway, there's always, like I said, there's always that additional layer that we were unprepared for. You know?
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
But man, thank God that, I've just thank God that we're finding each other, and I've met somebody like
Right.
yourself, and like I said, man, thank you so much. I agree with you. I think these conversations give me hope. They make me just they fuel me for the future, because it really does feel so much better when I can break away from being isolated and alone in my rec room,
Yeah. Yeah.
reading these dark details, and then come and at least you know have a legitimate in-depth discussion with people with open minds who are just willing to really kind of lay it all out on the table and
Yeah.
honestly attempt to interpret it without forcing some sort of confirmation bias down people's throats. It's like I am always open to being wrong, and
Same.
if you aren't that way, I think you're running the risk, right? That's all I'm saying.
Oh
And
yeah.
so thanks again, brother, as always.
Anytime. And I'm already excited for the next one. Everyone else, make sure and go to risetoliberty.com/links. That will pull up my master link, every single platform. Just like Austin, just like many of us in this space, our big tech overlords don't want any of us to grow. They want to stifle all these things. And so, unfortunately, we have to have multiple platforms. We have to have redundancies on redundancies to make sure that we can still get these out. But by going to risetoliberty.com/links and going to visit Austin everywhere he's at, I'll make sure everything's in the episode description so you can easily find it. But you can find this over on Rumble, YouTube, of course, until that ends up clearing out at some point. It is over on Odyssey. It will be Instagram, Telegram, X, all of the places. Make sure to hit that like, that subscribe, all of these things, because tell the big tech overlords to go fuck themselves. We are getting these messages out one way or another. And on that note, hang out for a minute, Austin. We'll wrap up on the back end. And everyone else, until next time, stay free, my friends.